Aye.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Delegate Sullivan, we'll come back to you since you're here now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I infer from your comment that I missed my earlier roll call, so I apologize for holding up the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is HB 1978, and I think we've got a handout that we're sending around you might take a quick look at. HB 1978 began life last session as HB 199, which actually reported favorably, nearly unanimously out of the Education Committee last year, 21-1, but got caught up in some switches late in the session. So here I am back again with HB 1978, which would create something called the Digital Citizenship, Internet Safety, and Media Literacy Advisory Council within the Department of Education. Let me skip to the end and just simply say there is no fiscal impact here. The DOE, who I think is going to testify in a moment, will tell the committee that it can do this work based on its currently available resources. What the Advisory Council would do would simply try to collect from around the Commonwealth best practices from school systems that are already working in this area and make available to school systems all around the Commonwealth, if they wanted it, best practices in teaching digital literacy to our young people in the K through 12 school system. Frankly, this idea came to me when I heard about some work being done in other parts of the country. You know, we all know how much time, frankly, we all spend in front of our screens, but it's particularly, I don't want to say a problem, but a challenge with our kids who get most of their information these days from a screen either held in their hand or on their desk. And what this, the concern that at least I have, and I think everyone on the committee ought to have, is that kids need to be taught, just frankly as I was, to you can't judge a book by its cover. I would direct you to a 2016 Stanford study which talked about, I'll just read you a couple of quotes. It says, when it comes to evaluating information that flows through social media channels, students are easily duped. They went on to say that many people assume that because young people are fluent in social media, they are equally perceptive about what they find there. Our work shows the opposite to be true. So there is important work going on all around the Commonwealth having to do with teaching our kids to separate, how to separate the wheat from the chaff on what they see on the internet. I've talked to kids who will tell you that they get most of their news through Twitter. That might be a good place to start, but it's hardly the place we want our kids to end. So what this would do is have the Department of Education bring together people from all around the Commonwealth, particularly the council would consist of teachers and librarians, PTO organizations, school administrators, and professionals in related fields to develop model policy and make them available to school systems around the country. As I said, the millennial generation is getting all of its news and information this way. And that's fine. That's the wave of the future. But we want our kids to be able to navigate safely and intelligently what they're learning online. There is nothing prescriptive about this bill. It doesn't direct local school systems to do anything. So there's no unfunded mandate here. It will simply make available to those school systems interested in it the latest information from around Virginia and frankly from around the world on how to promote news, media, and digital literacy and safety. That is how to navigate the internet safely. How to incorporate those into things we are teaching our kids. So I'll close and then I'm happy to take questions, Madam Chair. Each of us walked from Pocahontas today through the Visitor Center, and I don't know if you bothered to notice, but up above the Visitor Center entrance is inscribed the following words. Every day on it says, whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. That's, of course, Thomas Jefferson. This bill simply is an effort to make sure that as our kids grow up in this ever more increasingly digital world, they remain well informed, and that way they'll become better citizens. So I offer you HB 1978, and I'm happy to offer to take questions.
Madam Chairman.
Delegate Adams.
Delegate Sullivan. I think the idea of this bill is very good, and I like the interest you have. I'm just looking at the fiscal impact. There is no fiscal impact for 2019, but there appears to be a small impact to the general fund, $55,000 in the following 2 years. Is that your understanding?
Madam Chair, Delegate Adams, frankly, DOE is here. I think they can address that. If you look at the currently online impact, it has no impact. I think what happened was an impact was erroneously filed. It's been withdrawn. I think the decision's been made at DOE that they can do this with existing resources. If you think, really, they're just going to perform a convening role. And I think they decided that there was no extra money needed in the budget for it. So I think if you look at what's online now, you'll find that it says no fiscal impact.
All right. Madam Chair.
Delegate Adams.
Well, I think some of the points that you raise are very good, and not just with regard to the security for children, but also the effect of just unlimited hours of screen time that we see in the schools, and it really does require, I think, a more intentional approach. Having said that, my understanding was there is a letter from the Speaker that this be referred to appropriations. I thought it was for this amount. But if at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to report and refer.
Okay. A couple more people want to speak.
Okay.
Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just ask a patron, because it's not prescriptive and it is permissive, and it's basically the council here would be able to, as in one of the lines here, develop and recommend after study and consideration of a variety of sources and perspectives. Basically, they could bring in, if my understanding is correct, they could bring in, reporters, they could bring in editors, they can bring people who actually procure vetted facts for a living and procure journalism for a living, and to actually brief them and to work in collaboration with them in order to help people understand the difference between, basically what amounts to fake information and false information versus actual news and actual reporting. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, yes, Delegate Rome. The idea here is to try to have DOE be a convener of experts in the field as well as concerned parents, librarians that are working in school systems to provide information to our kids, teachers, government teachers, from obviously all political persuasions. I frankly don't view this bill as a political bill at all. This is a bill that has to do with making sure our children are good citizens and understand that while they may be looking at one site or another, they may also need to consider what those sources are, other websites, other ways of getting information. As I said, it's frankly just the digital equivalent of what I learned 1,000 years ago, which is you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't necessarily judge the information on a website because it's a good-looking website or because of what its URL might be. You need to scratch at it a little bit, and this is a skill we just have to have our young people developing.
Delegate Byron.
Yes, I have a question. Certainly a lot of things sound good, and it's certainly something that we are having challenges with, even us adults do, with finding out what the truth is. I wouldn't necessarily say just bring in a reporter in that you're going to hear the facts, but my question is, in line B, you have a representative of PTO. Is that where the parent comes in? Is that the parent representation, or?
Where are you, line? What? I'm sorry.
I was wondering if parents were included in this. So, is the representative of PTO the one that's supposed to be bringing in the parent perspective?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Delegate.
Okay, and I guess, maybe as this works through a process, if it goes out from here to appropriations, is that there are a lot of things that with the internet that we need to, in my area, the Operation Blue Ridge Thunder is certainly dealing with internet safety and in a different way than what you are referring to here. You do mention internet safety, but it's dealing more with digital citizenship, it seems, than the broad spectrum of safety. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Delegate Byron, no. I think the mandate of the council, frankly, is sort of well captured in its name. Internet safety would be a very important part of what the council would be charged with looking at. Everything from what kind of personal information should you allow onto the internet to how you might what's the responsible way to behave on the internet. That's clearly part of its mandate.
Follow-up question.
Byron.
So the recommendations that would come out of this, would they come back to the General Assembly like we do with other issues that we're mandating to the schools to do that would give us an opportunity to support or oppose?
Madam Chair, yes, if you look, Delegate Byron, at lines 36 through 37, there is a requirement that the council submit a report of its findings to the chair of the Education Committee and the Senate Committee on Education and Health by the end, I guess it's October 31 of next year.
Follow-up question, but the Department of Education, do they have the authority to implement this without us, minus a report? They still have the authority to do this based on your legislation?
I would say they have the authority to implement it, but if I've learned anything about this body, if the report gives anybody any concern, we've got that oversight.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Freitas.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think my issue with this is I certainly can support the intention. My problem is I'm always skeptical of another advisory council going and telling a bunch of students this constitutes truth and this does not constitute truth. I mean, we should be teaching critical thinking skills in school. That's obvious, but I'm worried about how this could potentially be manipulated beyond the bounds of what the patron intends. So I don't think I'll be able to support this bill.
Delegate Campbell. Jay Campbell.
Delegate Sullivan, I'm just unsure what road you're asking us to go down here. I'm concerned that ultimately what you're empowering this council to do is act as a thought police. And that concerns me. Anyone that's concerned about protecting the First Amendment ought to be worried about what the possibilities are for this council. So tell me what it is exactly that the council will be doing in regard to how they will develop these policies, what type of policies we're talking about, how they'll educate students regarding those policies. What is it exactly you're asking us to do?
Madam Chair, thank you, Delegate Campbell. Frankly, with all due respect, I have precisely the opposite view, or at least I want to suggest to you you should have the opposite view. This council certainly is not going to become the thought police. Quite the contrary. What it's meant to do is provide resources to teachers all around the Commonwealth to make sure that our children understand that they should avoid anyone who thinks that they are the thought police, that they should have the skills necessary, both literally technical, but more importantly, the judgment to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff on the internet, to ask those questions. Should I believe this particular website? Here's someone who says something different. Here's Twitter, it does this. To have a growing sophistication about how to navigate what we all know to be, and sometimes an overwhelming amount of information available on the internet. This advisory council is not going to be teaching anyone anything. It's not going to be determining what is or isn't true. It is simply going to be a resource to our school systems, our school boards around the state, gathering information and making it available to those school boards where, just as a for instance, the school board in, pick a jurisdiction, Harrisonburg, Virginia, can have its, let's say, high school government teachers go to and say, look, take a look at what they're doing in other parts of the world, or what they're doing in other parts let's say they're doing it in Richmond. And let's consider putting that into our curriculum. Let's analyze it, see if it's right for us. Let's get our government teachers to take a look at it, and then let's make the decision as to whether we want to incorporate that into what we're doing with our high schoolers. This is not a thought police thing, and it's not a mandatory thing. It's a resource development thing, simply to make these to take a look at what's going on in this field and make it available to school systems around the Commonwealth.
Hi, Delegate Sullivan. I've actually taken one of these particular courses. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, may I converse with the delegate or ask a question? Delegate Sullivan, I have actually taken one of these courses. And what they do is they assist even in research projects at the college level, like how you can identify credible sources or resources when maybe doing school projects or trying to come up with, maybe talking points for an exercise in class. It was very helpful even to the psychology class that I took, because news is just not political. News is also informative on other platforms. So even in my IT industry, we have to make sure that we are pulling accurate information or good information when we're informing ourselves. For maybe it's just an update to a function that I do for my job on a day-to-day basis, or maybe it's a patch update. So we just need to know that we are pulling from credible sources. So it's not parsing anything, but it's actually affirming that we are using credible resources when whatever we're doing in an academic platform or maybe just in a research platform.
Well, thank you, Delegate. The real genesis of this bill, I have 4 millennial children, Madam Chair, and they all grew up, really frankly, as the internet was just dawning. And it was sort of a family joke. I would come home and I'd ask them, what'd you do in school today? Well, I was doing a research paper on X, Y, and Z. Where'd you get the information? Well, Dad, I read it on the internet. It must be true. And frankly, there's still an awful lot of that out there. And Delegate Ayala makes a very good point. This, as I said earlier, this is not partisan or politics. This has to do with you're doing a research paper on the latest developments in fusion. Where can you get good information on that? Where can't you get good information on that? As I said, this is just the 21st century version of what we all learned when we were in school. At least I was using old-fashioned books as to, okay, how do you find out what the credible sources are and what aren't?
Madam Chair, a follow-up. May I follow up to that?
Delegate Ayala.
Yes. And I just want to add to that. Sometimes the resources that we pull are impactful to the grade that we receive in an academic platform. So if I'm pulling resources or have false information, it can create another issue for me as far as the grade I may have received for a paper that I've done because I don't have the most accurate or most identified or reliable resource when producing my line of work.
Thank you, Delegate Ayala. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I've heard that this is permissive, although all the way through that says instruction shall, council shall, and then the other part of that I have a problem with is it's develop and recommend to the board for adoption in 24, 28, 31, which kind of goes back to Delegate Byron's question a little bit, is that this is all going to be implemented before we have the opportunity. I mean, the board has, the way I read this, the board has the authority to implement this prior to the House education and the oversight to be done by October 31st. That's where I have a problem with this bill because I don't see it. I see it being pretty concrete in giving the Board of Education a lot of authority in this.
Madam Chair, I don't want my comments to be misconstrued. It certainly is directive to the department. We're asking the department to do something. What I was saying, it's not directive. It's the department is not directing school systems to do anything. That's the point I was trying to make, and maybe I just didn't do it very well. The department is not. We're not telling the department to issue regulations that you must do the following thing, local school jurisdictions. This is simply creating a resource for local jurisdictions to do with it what they want, whether that's something or nothing.
Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question for the patron.
Doug Thomas.
My question is similar to Delegate Byron. In B, we were talking about little I and Roman numeral 3. Many of the most vibrant PTOs back in my district they enjoy several teachers as representatives. And I think I heard the patron say his intent there was parent. So if the bill was to move forward in the process, I was just asked the patron if he would be interested in striking the word representative and specifying that it would be a parent of the parent-teacher organization, so we have that in there.
If that's the suggestion of if that's a friendly amendment, I'm happy to agree to that. That is the intent. We would want parental representation on the advisory council. That's what I took that to mean, Delegate.
I think the way it reads now, representative could technically, you could end up with two teachers. If somebody who wasn't here hearing our conversation read it specifically, you could see two teachers.
Okay, so is that an amendment, a friendly amendment you'd like to make? All right. Anyone opposed to the amendment? All in favor, say aye. All right. So the amendment to strike. Council, you want to clarify that?
Madam Chair, and this is just one way to do it. The amendment would be on line 19, after organization, add who is a parent, and with the alternative language of also adding of a school-age child, and then keep all the existing language before that.
Okay. I'm fine with that amendment, Madam Chair.
So, Delegate Goditis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Sullivan, I wish to speak as a teacher. I have a 12-year teaching career and a master's in education, and I can tell you that in the classroom, there is no time with all the curricula that we're dealing with and all the pressure from all sides, including parents saying, why aren't you teaching my kids this? You should be concentrating on that. You would be amazed at the things that parents think teachers should be teaching to their children that maybe we think parents should be teaching them at home. But a lot of parents don't have that view. So I, for one, would be extremely grateful in my classroom if someone could hand me suggestions for how to cover this really important and really, it's a moving target. And if I have someone giving me suggestions as to best practices for teaching these ideas and values and this way of seeking reality, I guess, and keeping my kids safe from predators or whatever it is, teaching them about security, teaching them all that stuff. If there are best practices that you can hand to me in the classroom, I will bless you for that. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the bill?
Zach Robbins with the Department of Education. The administration supports the bill, and as the delegate mentioned, we can absorb the commission within existing resources.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Lisa Stibe, Virginia Education Association, and we support this bill. Thank you.
Great. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to the bill?
Madam Chair, move to report.
Second. Madam Chair, substitute motion. Move to PBI.
Okay. So that is ahead of the...
2 minutes each side.
Right. So you have 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, and
I defer. I defer. I've already made my comments, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman.
Madam Chair, we deal with a lot of important issues down here, but it's really hard to come up with one that's more important for preparing our children for the 21st century. My 2 new grandchildren will see the 22nd century. I don't want this bill to become a political bill. It's the least political bill I've ever done, I think. I urge the committee to vote no on the pending motion. This is simply an attempt to help our school systems deal with the onslaught of information coming at their kids and helping them figure out how to manage what's happening on the internet today. Good, bad, and ugly. it would just be a tragedy if this were to become, if it's because of me and you don't want me to get a victory, someone else take it. I don't care. This is an important piece of legislation for our kids and our grandkids.
Madam Chair.
Don't pass this by. It passed education last year, 21-1.
Thank you, Delegate Sullivan. Delegate Adams?
All right, I think we have just a few more seconds in terms of the debate, and I will be voting against the motion to pass by indefinitely, as I mentioned. I think some of the comments that were made with respect to news, I mean, it's really not about news sources. I mean, there is a problem with scholarship coming out of high schools right now, and you're seeing this in the colleges, recognizing what's an appropriate source to cite. But that's just one component of this. The other components, as I mentioned, are internet safety and best practices for how to use technology. And nothing is mandatory on a local school board. These guidelines, these are model instructions that the council shall propose. So the council shall adopt these, but or the board shall adopt it, but they're model instructions to be with respect to the best practices. So I just want to make those comments so we understand exactly what we're voting on, and of course people are free to do what they wish, but that's why I'll be voting against that, and if I have the opportunity, I'd make the motion to report and refer.
All right. So the motion on the table currently is to pass by indefinitely, PBI this bill. This is a recorded vote. All right. Pass by indefinitely fails on the vote of 14-7.
Move to report, Madam Chair.
Second.
Oh, second.
I do have a letter. It would have to be referred to appropriations. So you want to?
Move to report and refer.
As amended?
As amended.
Second.
Fuck Fred.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dr. Bryan.
just speaking to the bill briefly.
You have the floor.
I just want to speak to the patron, and I can see your passion and what you want to do. I've been there and understand that, when you're really hooked on something, and it's unfortunate that, things are the way they are today, which is why you have to try and guide your own children in understanding about how to research and get things. I wish your bill dealt a little bit more with using this to teach them about citizenship, period, rather than getting into news, facts, opinions, and things like that that can somehow always get down the wrong track. And that's why there's a little bit of fear from those that don't trust that everything's going to go the way that we always want them to go. So I still have some concerns with the bill for that reason. I commend you for what you're trying to do. But the reason I was having issues with it is I think they have to understand a lot more in our schools about citizenship, which we need to get back on track and make sure our children understand that.
May I have 30 seconds to respond?
I have a comment to make.
Sure.
There actually is already a citizenship, a civics kind of citizenship advisory council out there. I don't know exactly what it's named. And maybe this needs to be included under what they're actually doing and versus a standalone too. And maybe that's something that the board could entertain as far as part of that group's venue.
Madam Chair and Delegate Byron, maybe just as evidence of my appreciation for your comment, I want you to know I served several years on the Civics Commission, and frankly couldn't agree more with you that we need to be doing more with our children, teaching them civics. If you're anything like me and you talk to kids about what you do down here, they don't even know what the House of Delegates is. Now, sometimes if you tell them it's the House of Burgesses, they'll remember it from 4th grade. But we can do a much better job. And I don't want anyone to think that I think this particular bill solves all of those problems, and certainly not the one you raised, Delegate Byron. But I'm very sensitive to that and have tried to use my time and talents both here and on the Civics Commission as well. You're exactly right.
All right. There are a couple people in the queue, but I know you all have to get to caucus. And so what I really like to do is go ahead and ask for the vote. Okay? So where we are right now is to report and refer with amendments to appropriations. All right. So the bill passes to report and refer and a vote of 14-7.
Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen of the committee.
Thank
Appreciate it.
All right. So our colleagues, we have to go to caucus. So at this point in time, all the bills that we have left will be heard on Monday. And so anyone who is here today to testify, I apologize that we didn't get to your bill today. I hope you can come back next week, and we stand adjourned.